I'm going to post the terms and conditions in the chat in just a moment, if you could read them. We ask that you mute during the recording just for clarity for the afterplay and for those participating. We're doing kind of a handoff in our meeting, so you can use the raised hand every time. You can use the raised hand. That's when I try to combine two words and say them both at the same time. Yeah. Raised hand anytime that you want to talk. If you want to weigh in on what the person is saying, in the chat, you can just type weigh in, and that's how we know if you just want to keep the conversation going. Or if you want to raise your hand, you can also raise it to change the topic, because sometimes we'll talk about various things during the meeting. And if you can just pass it off to the next person. If you click on the people, you can kind of see who's next, or sometimes your computer will put the raised hands in order for you. But if you don't know, that's okay. I'm here to help. That's it. I'm your moderator today, and I don't have many announcements. Pretty much just on like our regular schedule. We've completed like a couple of big projects with the launch of the workbook, and our calendar is posted on the website with all of our meetings. I think one of the most common questions I've gotten is about the sacred space meetings. So we now have 3 sacred space meetings for those members. Basically, you get your first part of your workbook that includes your journal prompts. You'll engage with your workbook up until sacred space for that journal prompts. And it's okay if you want to, complete it after. There's no like timeline on things, but by kind of completing it before your sacred space meetings, you get to kind of, if you want to chat about what you journaled about and get feedback if you want. So we have sacred space on the first Saturday of every month. So that is now a standing meeting. And then there are 2 meetings on the 7th. We have like an earlier session and a later session. And those are all on the calendar. The time zones are all posted there. So yeah, I think that's all I got. This week is, we have, for the 15th, we're doing our foundations dedication. And on the 16th, Jen Marie does her monthly workshop showing up, and that's a great one. That's kind of like an add-on. And that's really what's going on for the week. Pass it over to Jen Marie.
I have a really sexy, sick, low voice going on. At least that's what I'm telling myself. Kids are gross, and my kids brought something home that they decided to share, and I'm really appreciating it a lot. So yeah, I may or may not lose my voice. That'll be fun. Those in the Spellcrafters Guild tonight, I am absolutely going to be doing the meeting tonight with the guild. I'm really, really, really excited to meet with you guys tonight because I have a bunch to talk about. I don't feel sick, and I have done so much work over the past 6 months with my relationship with my physical body that this time being sick, it has been not a little bit different. It has been really different because as soon as I felt that I was that shit's going down, right? As soon as I felt that something was amiss in my body, I my my response was completely different than what it has been in the past. Like in the past, I would be like, "Oh man, this sucks. I hate being sick. It's such a waste of time," and would be in resistance to it, right? I just knuckle down and just kind of push myself through things. And I didn't do that this time. I didn't even have to redirect myself. And that's the really exciting part when you are in your practice and something you've been working really hard on for a long time, you get the opportunity to practice it and you're like, "Oh my God, I didn't even have to like redirect. I went straight to the new relationship." And that new relationship was, "Oh, you're sick." Of course, I tease my kids about it because I have to. It's part of like the mom thing. But immediately went into what do I do to support my body? And uh started drinking a bunch of water and started doing all of the stuff and I don't know how to explain the complete difference in this time being sick than probably every other time. Because of that, just I'm not hating on myself at all or like treating my body like it's fighting an illness isn't an inconvenience to me, right? Which is I mean, I laugh about it now, but so much of my life I saw, any physical inconvenience as, like, this bad, terrible thing, and I'm truly and sincerely not looking at it like that, and it's so rewarding that that's a am I frozen? Oh, okay, because Maria was frozen, so and again, weird. Maria and I have this thing, when we do video chats, it always is something weird. I don't know why, but thanks for coming to my TED Talk. I don't have a direction today. Does anyone have Maria's frozen again. Am I frozen? If Maria's the only person on camera,
Neither one of you were
then
frozen
oh
on my
geez.
end.
Why is
So,
everyone
I don't
shy
know.
today? I think hi. I think it's you can go ahead, Diana. Hi, Kim. Hi, Karen. It is hi, Lacey. It's so weird just like being up here chatting to a bunch of dots with letters. I have a hard enough time, guys. Um, Deanna, did you want to go? Is it Diana or Deanna? Or was that an accidental hand raise? Because that's totally valid.
Totally valid. Accidental hand raise. And it's Diana.
So, what's been going on in everyone's world this last week? Any any burning questions or experiences anyone wants to talk about? I could talk about my new kitten. That's been a whole thing. Like I go ahead, Alicia. Save everyone from the kitten stories.
Oh, you don't have to. We can talk about your kitten too. I was just going to throw a topic out there because it was something that kind of interested me. Um, so I know I posted it on a couple of places, but I thought it'd be an interesting topic to talk about. The So I was watching a TikTok and her name is Emily Dexter. And like I said, I know I mentioned this with a few of you guys, but she mentioned how some people need to have something in their hands when they are connecting to energy and magic and doing things like that. And it kind of intrigued me. I'm like, well, that's kind of weird. It's a weird thing to kind of say. And then I thought, you know what? And I don't know, it just like dawned on me. It's like I feel my energy and my magic the strongest when I have like my camera in my hand, when I have a paintbrush in my hand, when I have something physical in my hand, I can feel it. And I just like, it's like, ooh, and it like blew my mind. And I was like, oh, because there's times where I feel like I'm struggling so much to connect to things, but when there's something in my hand, I'm like, well, that explains like wands, and that explains like that's not a whole lot of like just connected a whole bunch of dots. So anyway, but we can talk about your kitten too.
I'd rather talk about this. I love that so much. Magical tools, right? Am I right? No. And like it truly is about that the practitioner's relationship with the tool, right? It's not the tool itself that like creates the magic, it's the relationship with the tool that makes it flow that way, right? And I love that you brought up your relationship with your camera and how that is absolutely a magical tool in Alicia's hands, right? And anything can be a magical tool. And do you guys, does anyone want to, before I dive into like my perspective on this, how this works and why, does anyone want to share their perspective uh on how this works and why? Anyone? You know how we talk about how witches stand in the gap in the physical world and like the spirit world, the energetic world. Uh, the way that I see witchcraft in general, right? When you're doing spell crafting and rituals, that's what you're doing is you're bringing this internal spiritual process and you're bringing it to the physical plane. And by doing that, you're taking these two worlds and stacking them on top of each other in a way that you personally interact with. Does that make sense? And that is what a magical practice is figuring out how your system, like you could, okay, so you could initiate into a tradition, and those initiations will help you cultivate a relationship with those correspondences and that way of working with energy. If you don't have a contact to personally initiate into a tradition, then and when we're building our foundation like we are at Bright and Dark, we're looking at personal correspondences and developing that personal relationship with your magic and your unique way of connecting to or balancing that physical world and the spirit world, because we all do this a little bit differently. And you start actually exploring your own system, right? And looking at, do I process information from spirit visually, auditory, do I do it through physical sensations or through emotions or whatever? And the more you understand again how your system receives that information, you're able to develop a practice in witchcraft that uses those things, not only uses them, but uh, like it's like I get the exercise. You're exercising that. You're cultivating that relationship so that that connection is more powerful and more effortless. Because that's Kim's gonna remember this. George used to always say that. Uh, George is one of our mentors. He used to always say that you've gotten there. You know you're a witch when it is effortless. It's just, it is a part of who you are. And when you get to the point where your magic and your connection to magic is so effortless, when you do put effort into something, it's that much more powerful, and you don't have a bunch of your energy like tied up in things. Does that make sense? You're not spinning as many plates energetically. Uh, so that's kind of cool. And that's what your Book of Shadows is for, is to keep track of all of that stuff, your process, your workings. How did this work out? I used mugwort in my blah, blah, blah. Well, apparently my body's allergic to mugwort and probably shouldn't do that, right? And so you put that in your Book of Shadows. It's good information. Sometimes we forget and get creative, and that's not something you want to fuck with. Go ahead, Maria.
Yes, I have a rainbow on my face. Oh, where to go? It's actually from the sun catcher that we made. I always have rainbows in my room now. And this one's on my face. I wanted to, when Alicia, when you first posted that, it made me think of when I started, when I was really getting into my divination practice, and I had decided I wanted to try to do it a bit try to do it professionally. Oh, sorry. And read for like other people. And I remember I used to I like using the tarot cards, but I really like just going off intuitive, and I do receive a lot of information auditory. And so whatever tool I use is really just like a support for my intuition. But what I was immediately thought of is when I used to do what I would call like jewelry readings, where I would hold a piece of jewelry and get information. And like 20-year-old Maria believed that I was really like getting information like from this piece of jewelry. But what kind of makes more sense now and feels is that, yes, like I may be getting some energy, maybe some feeling signatures or some energy, but that I was just really grounded with holding the jewelry, and that person, the person in front of me that was wanting the information. So I totally agree. And it didn't really, I never really thought about it too much until you mentioned it. So thank you for like bringing it up. But like, I just remember like when I would be holding whatever it was, that item, I was probably more accurate too. And I was like able to get a lot of information. Um, and because I have a lot of thoughts at once, like it did provide a grounding to kind of help focus the information. And also the other thing that I do, when like the ADHD-ness is like really active, is a doodle. So like holding the pen and just like doodling is actually helping me pay like attention to what's going on. So I think for me, like it is a bit of a grounding mechanism, like a magical tool, but a bit of a grounding mechanism to help like focus information. So it's like a dual, like a multi-purposeful thing. And obviously because it represents to me in that way, it works in that way, right? Because I like kind of believe that that is true now because I've had enough lived experience. And so now it just is until I decide it's not. But it does work for me. So thank you for bringing it up. Let's see. Who are the people? No more raised hands, just me. Who else? Alicia.
I'll go again. Yeah, there was another little thing that I kind of was pinged about the other day. I don't remember. Oh, it was when everyone was. Oh, there we go. Everyone was mentioning like the dream stuff. So was it Ray? Somebody was asking about dreams. I don't remember who it was. Someone was talking about dreams, and it pinged me. I was like, right, we were all talking about write them down, write them down, write them down. And I was like, yeah, but what? And I just remember thinking, like, I write them down, and I know it helps and it makes a difference. I'm like, why do we write it down? And suddenly, like yesterday or this morning, somewhere in this realm, it dawned on me. It's like, oh, it's like bringing the energy, bringing the stuff from one realm into the physical realm. When you write it down or when you talk about it or something, it like makes it more real almost. I don't know if that's right, but it like makes it more physically tangible. Yeah. Thanks, Jenny. I love your enthusiasm. But yeah, so and then just a side note on the camera thing, my family's up. They're the first ones who picked up on the fact. My husband's like, you're never cold when you have your camera in your hand. Like, I'm notoriously cold. Like, when it's cold outside, I'm freezing and I'm always complaining how cold I am. You put a camera in my hand, I forget to eat. I forget I'm hungry. I forget I'm cold or it's too hot or anything. Like, everything else disappears and I'm like in this whole different realm. And I never really caught on to that until he mentioned that. I'm like, oh, it's really true. So yeah, it's just further, yeah, anything can be a tool, but it does feel very grounding at the same time. So yeah. Okay, anyone else who wants to talk? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just going to skip the raise hand just now. So I find it interesting too that so many of us, the way that our brains work, we're able to be more present physically when we're doing things like coloring, or we have a fidget toy, or we have a blah, blah, blah. It's like, tell me you're neurodivergent without telling me you're neurodivergent. I'm a witch. Right? It's just that it's funny that, not funny, but I love that. I mean, it's a way that our brains actually work better when we are engaging actively in the physical world. And I think, like, personally, for me, I feel like I'm processing so much information from the spirit world all of the time. And I tend to be there all of the time, just like always receiving this information. And so doing things in the physical world really helps me maintain that balance. And that's one of the reasons why, like, even in meditation, it is easier, and meditation comes, that calm and centered place of just like being very present. That's what I mean when I say meditation. That calm and centered place of being very present when I'm engaging with the physical world in some way. So I'm listening to something, or I'm using my physical sensation. I'm feeling for the wind, or I'm feeling for the sunshine, right? um, those of you that went to the autumnal convergence, I got to show you guys how I like to meditate and harmonize with my like physical environment. And that, I think, is a part of that. It's like it- I have to actively, almost, it feels like I have to actively be embodied. I have to actively support my system to maintain embodiment, because, and it's not just like a trauma dissociation thing. It's a holy shit, there's a lot going on thing, right? And so I use tools to do that, and doing things like using bracelets, or I l- I love the sigil tat ink. I saw that on your hand, Wit, your little ink work. But I love doing those kinds of magical workings. That's a way of bringing something from the spirit world into a physical place to keep your mind in a specific, uh keep saying frequency. Go ahead, Channa. I'm going to jump off the soapbox now.
That's funny. Sorry for the birds in the back. They think if we're talking, they're talking. Um, so I was at a thing yesterday and Friday night for a friend of mine owns a shop. She imports ancient Tibetan singing bowls. And she had just gotten a huge batch of them in. And a friend of hers comes in, he came down from Idaho, because he does this kind of the same sort of thing where he can hold the bowls and talk about, he can, where they were made, where they traveled to, how old they are, the makers and things like that. It's really fascinating to listen to him. But which kind of fell into that. But also, it struck me because the reason he can do this is because he was in a major car accident like 20 years ago, that basically killed him. Like, he flew out of the car from one side of the freeway and landed on the other, and like, just, massive damage, brain, like, major brain damage. But what was interesting is that talking to him yesterday, just listening to him talk and interact with people, the reason he can do all that is because basically he has no veil. Like, that experience basically just stripped the veil, and so he sees everything, which is, I can't imagine being able to see everything. Like, we see about 3 to 5%, and he sees like all of it, and then trying to navigate that world. But what was really interesting to me, especially as a mom of, my middle child is autistic, and we're all neurodivergent, clearly, but how similar his thinking and behavior was with what we see in autism. Um, Not that autism is brain damage, but just the lack of the veil and the lack of understanding, like, social norms and things. just, I don't know, it was just a really fascinating thing. The more I watched him, I'm like, if I didn't know his situation, I would have assumed that he was autistic. And I just wonder if there's a connection between the neurodivergence and the thinning of the veil. And also we fidget because we're understimulated, and so we have to like, or overstimulated and have to direct it somewhere. But anyway, I don't know. That was just kind of my thought, is just how similar those two seem to be, and just what the connection might be between the veil and the neurodivergence. So take it away. I can't see who's
Ezra.
Who's Ezra.
Yeah, this is a really, this is a special interest conversation of mine. So like, I, realized that I was on the spectrum like a few years ago. Like, I've been like toying with the idea for a while, and then like figured it out. And at the beginning of COVID, like I decided I wanted to look into being a behavior technician, which is like, somebody that works in ABA therapy. And I didn't end up doing that. But as I was doing the training for it, I was like, oh, okay, I see what's happening here. And then that's like around the time I started having my spiritual awakening as well. And there's actually somebody that I follow that talks about like autism as spirituality, and a bunch of different bunch of people talk about that kind of thing. And when I was really into neuroscience, I was looking at brain scans. Like I was literally like just thumbing through hundreds of brain scans and like reading about like what's the actual difference between the autistic brain and the non-autistic brain, or the allistic brain. And one of the differences is that there is, I can't remember exactly what the part of the brain it is, but it is literally thinner than allistic people. And, and so when you said like that the veil is thinner or non-existent, it made me think, I was like, oh my gosh, that piece of the brain, like the veil, like the physical veil. Probably not exactly that, but there is definitely a correlation there. And it makes a lot of sense too, given what we know about how science pathologizes magic and magical practitioners and spirituality that doesn't look Christian. That it would make sense that all of the things that have been recorded by science about autism is through this lens of this is something wrong with people. And it also makes sense why a lot of different cultures that are indigenous cultures really valued what autistic people or anyone with a brain difference too, because I think that's why a lot of these things look similar, is because they end up being similar in a, like, I don't know like what the actual physical relationship would be, but I'm sure it's different for every little section. But a lot of the neurodivergencies that we see actually boil down to a lot of the same things, just with different presentation. So some people hear things, and some people see things, and some people smell things, and some people have aphids, so their taste buds are like extremely sensitive. And like and if you look at that from a magical lens, those are like clairs, right? And and so there's so many different things that if we looked at it from a magical lens, if we were allowed to, we would actually see the magic behind it rather than the pathology and like how can we fix it. And I think it's really like a really interesting conversation. That's like one of my favorite things to talk about is what, like, I've been struggling recently. I'm just going to finish it with this, with what to call myself, like as far as like witch, sorcerer, mystic, because I like all of the words, and like I'm always kind of changeable about things, so I'm not like going to stick myself to anything. But I started thinking of it as a magical abolitionist. And because I am also very like politically motivated and want people to be free, the for me that magic is like intertwined with that. And then more that we as a society start to realize that the things that are wrong with us are actually like showing us the path to what our magic is. That is like actually freedom, at least to me.
Thank you, Ezra.
It might have been Maria that was first, but I'm not.
Yes, you got it. So, there's so much different science out there about like different things. And I saw something very specific about it, like relating to neurodivergence. Of course, I can't remember in this moment what it was. But it's interesting too, because I think that all of us are unique and all our brains are unique. And it's just like it is all one big spectrum. Like to me, it's all one big spectrum. And there's those of us that was easier to like jump into what was like normal. But like what, what is normal? But like just like this is when I'm like thinking about the big mysteries, like that we're all different, but there's just like social conditioning and this like social set of rules. And some of us like acclimate it more easily and some others like don't, and then the ones that don't is like then we get these, these various things. And like what Ezra is saying, like looking into it as it's wrong because it's not what like the normal is supposed to be. But really, like, I think that's all wrong. Like that we should all just be looked at as like a unique person, all like how our brains work differently, like in a perfect world. And maybe we'll get there, but working on it. And, like your then like we have these different experiences through life, and you might kind of like tap into other parts of your brain and your experiences and also like what you might actively pursue. Like, maybe like just because you maybe there's like a Claire, one like of the Claires, and maybe it's like not initially, I don't know, coming natural to you, whatever that is, but that doesn't mean, I don't believe that you can't do it. I also believe that you can tap into all of the Claires. You just have to find the path to it. And then practicing it and like that repetition, and then you're forming like the neural pathways, you know. And like maybe there are ones I do think that are like stronger does the way that your brain's makeup is, and incorporating your other senses, with it, and the physical body, all of the bodies, the physical body, with your brain and your spiritual. Anyhow, the other thing I wanted to mention is I don't know if any of you follow the medium. Oh, what's her name? I saw her in person. She's blonde and she has big hair. That one. And
Long
she
Island
actually,
Madam,
who is it?
Long Island Medium.
Yeah, the Long Island medium. And she there's this psychiatrist on TikTok that does brain scans of people, which is really interesting. And then thank you, Teresa Caputo, and like shows the brain scans and different things like that. So she is a medium and had her brain scanned while she was doing a reading, and it like was very interesting, and the brain did light up in these various areas. And she was like, I'm so happy that there's like now some scientific like evidence to what I'm doing, that my brain was engaging in this way. So that was just super interesting. Yeah, I think this is like a fascinating conversation, and as much as it has to do with the brain, for me, like so much ties into like the social conditioning and because of like the boxes that we're all put in, which is bullshit, but here we are. Jen Marie, off to you.
This is also a special interest of mine. So, all right. I love looking at things like a spectrum, right? That makes so much more sense than this like black and white thinking that we were raised in. And I think that all humans are able to access both the spirit world and the physical world. Some humans are much more physically centered, right? That I think would be what would be considered holistic, is very more physical. They're able to navigate 100% on the physical world and they don't connect as much on the spiritual world. It doesn't influence their lived experience. They have to search for it more. Does that make sense? Right? And then you go down the scale, and there's some people that cannot be embodied very well. They can't communicate physically. They can't they struggle with that. They are more in the spiritual world. A lot of like things like schizophrenia would be considered that. They are so in that spirit world, so in their own world, that they struggle with connecting to the physical world. And all of us are somewhere on that spectrum, right? Now you get to a certain point when you are very deeply aware of the spiritual world that it makes you disabled in the physical world, especially in a capitalistic society where you're meant to function very specifically, right? I would be considered disabled in a capitalistic society. I cannot do the 9 to 5 thing. My physical body isn't capable of doing that. Especially not on an extended period of time. It will literally kill me. I cannot function that way. And there are people that cannot perceive the spirit world. They're disconnected from it. It's not real to them. And all of that is valuable. And when we start operating from a place of oneness, we're able to communicate all the way down the line, because someone who is very physically oriented is not going to be able to communicate with someone who is very spiritually oriented. It has to do this like telephone thing. The the people that are able to navigate both are going to be able to be the interpreters, right? And that's kind of the way that I see humans as like pack animals are supposed to be able to function. But it's just the only thing that's kind of messing up the works is just, how we navigate modern society. But yeah, this is awesome. I love this conversation. Go ahead, Ezra. Oh, hold on. I do want to say that there is not a specialness to this spectrum, right? Just because you are more connected to the physical world doesn't make you better than someone who is more connected to the spiritual world, and vice versa. Like, just because you talk to demons or ghosts or whatever does not make you better than someone who is able to master capitalism. like it doesn't, there is no uh morality, I guess, involved. Anyway, go ahead, Ezra.
Yeah, totally. Like all of that. It's really, I was gonna say that, like, when you brought up schizophrenia, I have a friend that was talking about that. And, I would say that, like, there, like, literally, a lot of the early autism research was about how autisms often had schizophrenia. Like, there's a large comorbidity. There was also some overlap with like antisocial, what we call antisocial personality disorder. But that also kind of depends on how people present, because when you are more in the spiritual realm, your feelings might like not translate literally on your physical body so much. And it's really, I wanted to bring into the conversation too, outside of just like neurotypes, like trauma can also change like with the way your brain works. And the way that my friend and I were talking about it, because she was talking about her mom and how her mom was a deeply traumatized person and schizophrenic, and how she basically was her entire childhood was somewhere else. Even though she was physically there, she was somewhere else. And it kind of, the way that we were relating to it was that like when your physical body is going through trauma, it's kind of that detachment that we would call like that, or that psychology would call dissociation. Yeah, CSPD. CSPTD, PSD. Oh my gosh, I can't say it. Whatever. You know what I'm talking about. PTSD, CPTSD. There we go. That is considered neurodivergent, right? Like it literally changes your brain chemistry when something big like that happens to you. And so that's why a lot of symptoms of CPTSD look very similar to autism, and a lot of autistic people are have comorbidity with that. And so it feels like your body, like if you go through a trauma that is very physical, and then like you experience a dissociation, which dissociation to me kind of feels like you're even more in the spiritual realm than it is, healthy to be in for your physical body. That's where I spent a lot of my life. I always felt like I was like up here somewhere, above my head. I saw like a cartoon of somebody with a balloon sticking out of their physical head, and then their actual face was on the balloon, and that's like was very much how I felt for a lot of my life. And so but it makes sense for your body to protect you from the physical trauma. Like when people say that they dissociate so much that they can like see themselves, like they can look down at themselves, and to instead be in the spiritual world where it is safer, where we know that, that the physical world can't hurt us, essentially. And that's why I think we talk so much about feeling safe in your body. It's kind of like to call yourself back to your body. And there's so many people that were walking around without that mechanism of coming back to their body. And sometimes, like in the case of my mom's friend, she was in an abusive relationship for all of her life. So it literally was not safe for her to come back to her body for her entire life, So that's why, that was part of why anyway, like she probably had a predisposition for it. It was probably, and then you get into epigenetics. And so like if your great grandmother had a, trauma that changed her brain, then she probably passed that on, and like, etc. But yeah, so that just made me think about that, the way that trauma creates this experience with like almost a thinning of the veil, like we were talking about. And the way that we keep talking about, and I know I keep talking about it a lot, but like somatic therapy can help you feel safe in your body, which is why they're also like grounding exercises. Like all the somatic things are grounding, which is something I always really have to work on, because I tend to, I even had a reading recently where it was like a drawing reading, and I drew like a tree, because she just said scribble anything, and the top of my tree was extremely intricate. And she even pointed this out, that I'm more in the spirit world than I am in the physical world, because my roots were kind of weak. So yeah, so that's something I have to work on a lot. So I think wit.
This is something that I've been thinking about and doing a lot of like research and just thought on too, of, like what is like psychiatric diagnoses, and how, that it is such, like, they're all social constructs of how we understand society and what a group of people have decided that is a societal norm. Um, and so, and like the use of it to control a population as well too. And to put people in pretty little boxes and saying what you are allowed to do and what you aren't allowed to do, and what you, um, like what we've all kind of been talking about, like what is right and what is wrong. And thinking through what, Ezra, like what you pointed out of years ago, autism wasn't even a thing. That we didn't have that word, that was, thinking of looking at the history of it, of where, the diagnosis comes from and the understanding of it. It is, and really you can look at all psychiatric diagnoses like that, of, that they're changing, they're evolving as society evolves as well too. And so it's been something that's been really like in the forefront of my mind, of just like, you know, um, working in the field that I do. So I am a behavior analyst. So I work with children, on autistic children, and just looking at the evolution of the field from even 5 years ago, of how far we've come from, well, some of us have come, not everybody. The field is very still not great. But just like the understanding that we have of like societal norms, the accepting of autistic voices, and understanding of what is needed, has been really interesting to be a part of. And also having that same time of my spiritual, like waking and hearing the witch's call, and like learning all of that at the same time. It's been a really fun experience with that. So yeah, it's something that fascinates me, of just like the society's like norms. I mean, it's been something that I've always talked about with clients, of, and especially caregivers, of like, do we really care if they do what is expected of them by the societal norms? No, I don't care. I never have. But there's, a lot of the focus is on that in the treatment of autistic people. And uh, but there's starting to have a swing back the other way, which I think is great. So, all right, back to you, Ezra.
Yeah, I wanted to say like how important it is that that people like you are in that world, because I follow somebody who is an autistic doctor who studies autism, and talks about how important like how condemning ABA therapy across the board is not going to be as helpful as people think it is, because it is the only thing that insurance pays for to help with autism. And so what is a more practical solution is, training people who already work in these spaces how to meet needs rather than curb behavior. And when you brought up diagnoses, that's one of the things that brought me, like, that interests me so much about nonviolent communication, is it's a written by a psychotherapist who basically is saying that diagnoses are not really necessary. That's putting people in a box, and instead we should be focusing on the needs that person has, rather than calling them a name and sorting them into a group so that we can put them into a room with other people who are like that. Because that's pretty much what it has been. My mom was a special needs teacher, and that was, when she was in it, eventually it was, more integrated, and she was the one that would go from classroom to classroom. But right before that, when my brothers were growing up, and when I was in gifted, which is also special needs, like that, we were separated into different classrooms, and everyone in my gifted classroom was also special needs. Like, looking back, like, all of my friends were on the spectrum. They had ADHD, or and or had ADHD, that kind of stuff. And so when, and Jen said too, you know, like, it's not, you're not special. They made us gifted. They literally said gifted. They made us feel special because we were more likely to get like jobs as like what, engineers or doctors or whatever, you know, society says is like the most important thing. But really that was kind of like their like carrot dangling of like, see, if you're high masking, then we won't punish you for being different. Like, you can be the quirky smart guy, you know, as long as, you know, as long as you're like, you know, Sheldon, and you can actually give back to society in a way that we approve of. So like, and the way I always say it is like, no one's special because everyone is special. It's like, if everyone were tall, you wouldn't be able to know, you wouldn't, height wouldn't even be a thing, you know, you wouldn't see it. It's just specialness based on what society decides is specifically interesting to them. Like, you know, and we're kind of in the you know, capitalistic industrial revolution, technological revolution. So those are the things that have, you know, really interested the people with money for a long time. And so that has where we've been. But I'm definitely seeing, you know, the shift. Like, I think all of us are, anyone that's, you know, in touch with the spirit, the spiritual world or the magical world, is starting to see the way that we are shifting minds away from needing, you know, to be so violent. And I just wanted to mention real quick that this includes like weapons, and I have a lot to say about what is happening, but I won't like take over the whole conversation with what's happening in the world, but I think you probably all get it. Maria.
So when I think that too, so, you know, we're all like, most of us here in the foundations program working through our shadow work, and it's like these things that occurred during our childhood that we either got praised for and received validation for, or we were punished for. And now here we are, these witchy, you know, adults, and like going back and working through all of this, like with shadow work. But it's just like, it's like so simple, but so complex. I'm always like in this duality of everything, you know, like that our parents, our caregivers, like we're all just trying to do the same thing, right? Like, you know, and I understand that's way more complex than that, and that in a way I'm kind of generalizing, you know, that like everyone was trying for the most part, if you could, like fit in, you know, and like figure out how to fit in and how to receive praise. And as children, it's important, you know, that is important to receive praise and validation, and that there's so much more information now just about all of this. And, you know, people seem to have shifted, and I don't have children, so I'm not like raising young ones, but I love them. And like, if anyone needs an aunt, I'm available. But you know, that there's like this more information, and like people are kind of shifting and raising their children. And I always think it's like it's hysterical to me, like when people pull the bullshit of like, well, my generation and you're like weak because my generation, we just pulled ourselves up by our bootstraps. And you know, I get that, and I understand that like that is important to them because they got like validation and felt valued, that they were able like to do that and then perceive like anything else as, you know, maybe weak. But it's just interesting because all of this, you know, tying it into like how we're all kind of working through our shadow work and going back to like, what is it that what received validation for and appeared as good, and what we didn't, and like, and then appeared as like bad. And now, you know, we're here like working through all of that information, and how it affects us now, how we interact with the world and other people now. And but I love being in these spaces to be able to like have these, conversations where you're just allowed, and anyone that may be, wanting to speak up or maybe like hesitant, that, this is a space where we can kind of share our thoughts, and, we understand that it is like our own perspectives and our own experiences. And so we can just kind of share and talk through these more complex things without judgment. So yeah, that's all. And people who would like to go next?
I'm gonna be real honest. I just got back from the bathroom. So I missed the last end of that like conversation. I literally like sat down, turned on the camera, and then Maria's like, "Ah." I love this what's going on in the chat here. By show of hearts, react. How many of you were in the talented and gifted program as a child? I'm just curious. You don't have to respond. It's a really common thing. Yeah. It's so funny. Me too. I was such a disappointment. And that's the whole thing too, is like in public school being like guilted and shamed because you would like I would ace all of my tests 100% but not do any fucking homework at all because my home life was fucking chaos. And like everyone in town knew that my home life was fucking chaos. Uh and so I was always being like guilted for not applying myself and blah blah blah. And I'm like, I'm doing what I want. Like, leave me alone. And then finally got to the point, I'm the kind of person that if someone tells me like I can't do something or someone tells me something is impossible, I fucking show them how it's done. Like I've always been that way. And that was my experience with school too, was that, you know, uh the public school system. I have lots to say about the public school system, actually. I have very strong opinions about it. Very, very. Um, but it's just all I ever saw it was as like training. Like, why are we doing it this way? It doesn't make any sense. Why we're teaching and learning in this way because it wasn't working. My autistic brain. I started reading child psychology books when I was like in 4th grade, I think it was. And so I would have like full on conversations and argue with the teachers about how they were approaching things because of how it didn't align with what I was learning about child psychology. And so they didn't know what to do with me. So they just sent me to the library. I spent most of my academic career in the library. I wasn't allowed to test with kids my age. I wasn't allowed to answer questions in class or anything like that because of my attitude. And, I would push back on things. But yeah, so I was a library kid. Go ahead, Ezra.
I was also a library kid. That happened all the time. I would literally sometimes I would just like finish all my work and my teacher would be like, okay, go to the library. Like, and then I also spent all of my lunch times there because I hated the lunchroom. So literally from the time I was a elementary school student, I would just go to the library during lunch times. And that was, if I ever made friends, it was the other people that were going there during, all of the sensory overload kids that are obsessed with books. Definitely not like the neurodivergent people. I'm like, going to a little quiet space. Yeah. So, like I did go to recess for a while, but like at least in elementary school, but then I was actually a big climber. Like they called me like a spider monkey. I was like a monkey bars kid. Yeah. Um, Yeah, it's the Spider-Man thing because they've been calling me Spider Kid since I was really young. But you know, I've always been into trees. I wanted to climb trees. Every time I saw a tree, I would just climb it. That's a big part of my practice now. So, you know, trees in general. But I was gonna say, gosh, I'm talking about the gifted thing. I'm losing it. But let's see. We were the things you said like made me think about it. Okay, I'm losing it, I think. Or let me look at the chat real quick. I might have done that. Oh, the public school system. Okay, cool. Yeah, I can go on a little bit of a public school system rant. Because yeah, like they said in the chat, like it was created to create mindless fast factory workers, and now it's like more of a cubicle worker thing because most of the jobs that we have that are like very purposeless, you know, like they're just like pushing pencils and papers. And like when I did that for a while, I would keep on coming to them with solutions, and they were like, why are you fixing this? Like, this is it, you're getting rid of what we planned for you to do all day by fixing like the whole thing. And they did not appreciate it at all. And I was so confused as to why they didn't appreciate it. And when I spent a couple years in like a cubicle type of job. And then, but most of my life I've been doing like childcare. Like I was a nanny for, you know, on and off for 10 years. And then before COVID hit. And then when I was in Seattle and I was working as a nanny full time for a, you know, like upper middle class family, they weren't even like very rich, like they both still worked and everything. They sent both their kids, like the one I was watching wasn't in school yet, but the older one, I got to see him go into kindergarten. He was going to, and I remember being like, oh, is he going to the public school down the road that I, you know, walked by? And she was like, oh no, he's not going to public school. Like, and then I got to see over the next couple of years the kind of school that rich people sent, like at least if they're mindful. Like there's obviously the like academic rigorous programs where they essentially like torture their children with, you know, memorization and all this stuff. But in Seattle, where it's very, you know, they're trying to do the more free, like, you know, Montessori, like, or Waldorf, if you know those like types of education, where it's child led. I got to see what that looks like. So like they know that what public schooling is doing to kids is wrong, you know, like because you see the way that when you can pay for it, how they treat the kids and like how like beautiful that is when that's what they participate in. And so that's just what it brought up for me, because they know, you know, and it's a little bit sad, and I still think about it because like these were very kind people for the most part. But then every once in a while they would say things like, I have a heart for the homeless, but just not in my backyard, you know. And by not putting their money into, you know, and by putting their money into private schools like that instead, it's a way of continuing to keep their resources private, you know, rather than sharing it with their community and stuff. And it informed a lot of the way that I see the world. When I moved there, got to see things from that side of things. So I think Maria might have. We're just
Thank
tossing it
you.
back and forth from you.
Tossing it. So I wanted to slightly switch, kind of stay on segue, lead into, as they say. I was going to say the chat is popping, and I'm like, this is my nerd. I'm like, is poppin' even a word? I only know slang from the 90s. I don't know if people still say that, but whatever. So, like, yeah, no, I don't know. I have some younger friends. I rely on them to tell me what things mean. And I don't, like when you write initials like, I know what LOL is. Beyond that, when there's letters, I always have to look them up. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what those mean. Anyhow, um, with some of what's going on into the chat and some of the like themes that we saw in Sacred Space with the Dreaming Moon, um, there was, you know, a lot of like discussion and introspection going on. And what the chat made me think of is my friends. I'm what am I? I was born in 1981, and so I'm like in between these two generations. And although like I'm millennial, I am kind of what do they call it, a xennial, I guess. And I actually like really resonate with kind of how like I part of how I like interact is I can kind of understand like or like resonate with both. I might not like agree, but I like can, you know, understand a bit. So anyhow, I have a lot of friends where they like believe that they just need to work hard and they work themselves to the bone, and like that's the most important, and that's how my dad was too. Like there was so many problems going on. His kids had like all these emotional needs, and if he just went to work, everything was going to be, you know, okay. um but like, you know, talking kind of about the social conditioning and a bit of that, and you know, like working through this dreaming moon and like what would you do, you know, um and how this like bit of like what we do for a living and how we receive money to like support ourselves and our family in this world, it might not be what we really like want to be doing, and like what do we do with that information. And there's just like this bit of social conditioning, you know, and I feel like it's kind of tied in, like, you know, talking about like the educational system. And then what do we do after that? And it's like, well, you can either go to college, you know, or get a job. Um, and just kind of like continuing on that, like not everybody fits, you know, maybe into like those two boxes. But again, here we are. And, you know, this like idea that just about like working and like your value is based off of like your monetary, you know, maybe contribution. But anyhow, just because too, it was we had great conversations within Sacred Space, and not that you have to mention it. And I think a bit of it came up in SASS last week, but just about this whole what do you want to do when you grow up bit. So if anybody wants to speak to it, go ahead. Okay, I wasn't talking about you, Karen. I wasn't calling you out, I swear to God. Like, and it was so many people. It was so many people. But yeah, thank you for the kind gesture. I'll take it lovingly. I interpret it as a love sign rather than the traditional meaning of it. All right, who we got going? Chana, you are next.
Yeah, so the dreaming moon, the sacred space, what would we do? Like my answer for that, it was really funny because after we ended that meeting, I had some time to sit and really think about it in a little bit different way. And what I realized is I'm focused a little bit on the wrong things. What I really want is freedom and security. The freedom to do the things I love and have great experiences because I have a little bit of wanderlust. But security, it all boils down to security. And so the things that I keep saying I want are very much rooted in this capitalist hellhole we're all currently living in, as opposed to what I would really want to do. I mean, if I didn't have to worry about money, if I just knew that we weren't going to be destitute in retirement, you know, that if I just knew that everything that we were going to be taken care of, that we'd always have enough food and shelter and whatnot, you know, I just want to be like the neighborhood crazy witch. Like, I want to make tinctures and potions, and all the things I'm doing right now revolve around healing, and I'm actually a natural teacher. I learned that when I was I did direct sales, and I'm like, I'm actually really talented if I know what I'm talking about. You guys don't get that because I get on here and I have absolutely no idea because this is all new for me. So I sound like a complete moron half the time and really scattered. But when I know what I'm talking about, when I'm confident in what I'm talking about, I'm a great speaker. I'm a great teacher. You know, I can share, I can simplify things down and make them easily understandable. But and that's what I would do. I would teach others. I would do healing stuff. I would just really lean into that healing thing. But the problem is that we don't live in that world. And so it's like the things that we do, it's like always kind of tainted by what we have to do, you know, what the reality of life is. And so it's okay, well, I need to do these things and I would just happily do them. I would do it all for free just because I enjoy doing it. But at some point, like we need to have a retirement. You know, like um and it's not going to work to just I know it's like, well, let it flow, just trust the process and stuff, but it's like my husband's 50, going to be 54, and I'm going to be 48 next month. Like we have no retirement because the plan was always, oh, well, let's get the kids raised, you know, and make sure they have everything they need, and then we'll have plenty of time to save. And that's just not happening. And the economy's done crazy things. So it's like what I want and what I would do if that was off the table are completely different things. And I don't know. That's Can we just like raise it all to the ground and like start over? Like we just burn the entire system down and start over. Could we build a better world? But anyway, I don't know. I just thought that was really interesting when I had a minute to really think about why I keep going back to those things and where I'm hung up. And it's just very fear-based. Like the things that I keep saying I want are rooted more in fear than in what I actually would do if everything else, you know, with the freedom to just do what I wanted to do. But I don't know. That was kind of my takeaway from that whole thing. I'm going to turn that over to Ezra.
Yeah, thank you, Chana. That's very in line with where my brain has been too. I went to two of the Sacred Space meetings. This is the first one. I didn't have as much time to put into it, but by the second one, I had really gotten to a couple of answers, because I had like maybe like 5 main answers for what would you do if you could do anything without fear of failure. And like one of my big ones was just magic. Like that's what I would do. I would just do magic. And that's like the idea that I could just like be like the local magician or mage or sorcerer or witch or whatever, alchemist, like all of these words that I really like, never really seemed accessible, because I would have, you're raised to think that you have to be in society, and to an extent you do have to, like in order to have a rent paid and bills paid and everything. And I do think, I think that we're building something in its place already, like Bright and Dark, just by being here at Bright and Dark, and connecting magically with other people who think the same way. Because I personally, I don't know how much other people believe this, but I believe that we create our own reality. And the issue is that we have all of these beliefs that make us think that we can't create our own reality. And so as we do all of this shadow work and start exposing all of those beliefs that behind why we can't do it, we will start you know, it'll start tumbling. Eventually you'll get to like this nugget that we all believe in, that we realize isn't true, and the rest of it will just like domino effect. And I think that's a big part of like what's coming. Like I think a lot of the, you know, witches that I talk to they get this feeling of like something is coming. And I think that is like pretty much what's coming, is us getting to this, oh wait, why are we all doing this way? We could be doing this another way. And I wanted to share a little bit. I have been writing a lot lately. I started to follow this kind of like regimen of writing every single day. Sometimes it's 3 pages, sometimes it's a little less, sometimes it's a little more. But what's come out of it, like the joke of the lady that wrote this book that says to do this, is why do we write 3 pages every day? Why do we do morning pages, she calls it. And she says to get to the other side. And and it's like kind of a joke, but it's not, because it's like when you do meditation, and you kind of have to get all the gunky thoughts that aren't your own, that were given to you, out before you can really clear your mind. That's what ends up happening. And I keep on sitting down expecting that I'm going to write a story, or a poem or a song, and I have written some of those. But like the big like shockers were that I started writing organizational systems. And that is like my brain literally has like resistance to it. And so I know I'm on to something because I keep on going, oh, am I organizing things? And I kind of had this idea of like structurally a way that we can redistribute things, redistribute resources, and like essentially it's kind of how it's supposed, like how you would theoretically think it would work. Like celebrities are supposed to be champions. The reason that we're all like so mad at celebrities right now is like they're supposed to be like, hey, that's that guy from my city, and he was raised into wealth, and he has all of this extra that he can do things with to improve the world. But the problem is that capitalism does not train people to actually give back to their communities. They're like, instead, these people are taught to hoard wealth. And so we end up being like, hey, what the hell? Why is that guy not giving back to his community? And because the way it's structured, the way that society actually has designed things to be, is that we end up giving it to just a few people. Like there's a reason we see the same like 20 people in movies over and over and over again, even though like they act like it's, oh, well, they're just really good actors. I'm like, there's millions of really good actors. There's no reason it has to be the same 20 people getting millions and millions and millions and eventually billions of dollars every time. And so eventually, like through things like, I don't really know exactly how it works, but the TikTok Creator Fund, like they were raising money, for causes by saying, I'm just by watching it, just by liking it, just by sharing it. And so if that's the case, then we could watch TikTok, things we already do, and end up putting money toward people who are going to use that money to actually put it back into their society after they take care of themselves and put their own oxygen mask on first. But like that could actually be a way to redistribute things if we all agreed that that was a way to redistribute things. And then there wouldn't be these like huge celebrities that are getting millions of dollars. Instead, it would be, more like in every community, there would be a few people getting donations, and then, they would probably make videos about, hey, I'm doing this. If you agree with this, watch this video and share it. Like, and then if you did something that they didn't agree with, then people be like, oh, I'm not going to share that, or I'm not going to follow that person. And that would be, instead of this big show of like, cancel culture when a celebrity does something you don't agree with, just be like, okay, I'm not watching that. So therefore I'm not donating my money to it. I'm not, and then you could feel good about, being on TikTok because you'd be like voting. And because I think a lot of people feel a little bit, at least I have in the past, felt bad about how much time I spend on TikTok, like during being sick and everything like that. But if it was for causes, that would make me feel a lot better about it. And I feel like that would be a way for us to get our votes back and to actually realign the way things were completely made into be in unalignment with what everyone wants to do, because I feel like, Chana, your story is like a lot of people's story, especially in this group. Like they just want to do magic, or art, or I think art is magic, but that is for me anyway. And so I think that a lot of people, if they, that would be a way to put money into academics who are only getting paid like, a few, but it's like $30,000 a year to get to actually study things. And I don't know, it could be a grassroots way to like run for office eventually in different ways. I don't know how the new world's going to be structured, if office is even going to be like a thing, but I think there's always going to be people who like organize things. So yeah, that's all. I think, I'm not sure if it was Maria or Jen Marie was first, but
I think I'm number 2. Okay. So, Ezra, I hope that you'll be in my camp during the apocalypse if you want to, that we can be in the same camp. So, I hope you all we're in a camp together. But, and I said in the chat, I'm watching The Walking Dead right now. So I'm very much like, where's my meeting place? What do I do? But anyhow, I do want to know where the meeting place is, though. It's been very important to me. So if we can decide that, let me know. If we need to meet, that we have a place to do so, to find each other. Right, Jana, exactly. We need a meeting place. Okay, focus. So I agree with the retirement plan and like the communities. I want to be there. Also, super happy that we're doing this like collective shadow work so that we'll all be like really great community partners to each other by working through like all this, which I think is really important. Otherwise, I'm sorry, I'm not going to live there, to be honest. If we haven't done shadow work, I can't go. So anyhow, what do we do now? These are like this is just my brain like sharing these questions. It's like, what do I do now? So this thing I've been thinking about this over and over, about this thing my aunt said to me. So my aunt, one of my aunts and I are very close, and she's been a big support to me through my whole life. And when I wanted to do theater, I wanted to do anything. Would have been an actor or work behind the scenes, would have wanted to like do anything as a job. And things happened within my family that were chaotic, and my plans changed. And so when I was trying to sort this bit out, my aunt said to me, like, she said, like, what you might do for the hobby doesn't always necessarily, is not always what you might do for a living. And that made very rational sense. And like, I understand what she was saying, but a bit about it always bothered me. And like, here we are, like, I'm almost like still asking the same question now, 20 years later, still like wrestling the same things. So it's like, on one hand, yes, I think incorporating that in this world that I'm in, I do have to make money to to live in my house and to eat and all the other things. So I do have to have income. And right now, what I'm doing isn't probably my highest excitement, but I'm grateful that it is supplying the income. And then, so there's this aspect of it of like, okay, like filling my life with things that I also enjoy. and making sure that I'm doing the things that I enjoy doing, that I love to do, that light me up, that excite me. But there's just always a bit of it that I go back to, like in this world, being a musician or being an actor, like you almost have to persevere through like everything and get told no like a bunch of times, and only a certain percentage of people like ever make it to all these famous people that we were just talking about, you know? And so it's like, well, what if I did? What if I didn't stop? What if I kept pursuing it? Um, but I felt, oh, I had to stop. Cause like, and in my case, like I did have to support myself, where I didn't necessarily have money coming in from anyone else supporting me at that time. And so it was like a need thing I felt. But there was just that bit about like what she said that just kind of, I'm like, but those people that are the famous people, they heard like no a million times. They had to keep like pursuing what their like dream was, against all odds, right? And I know there's like other people that might have famous parents or whatever, like nepo thing, which I just learned that word recently. Like, and so I know there's like that, but the people that like me, that just like came up, and did like found great success through, and like we call them famous, people. um so anyways, I'm just really sharing thoughts that have kind of been in my brain the last couple of months, and I don't necessarily, actually, they've been in my brain the past couple of months heavily, but they've actually been in my brain for like 20 years, so it's like, what am I doing? Like, so I'm working at this job that when I get up every day, like I'm not excited to go to. So there's like that bit, but yet I have this income that I appreciate, and that what I want to be doing is like and I think what I want to be doing is spending my day doing things that I want to do, or, and then there's this bit about manifestation, right? And like belief work and all of this, that when I had a meeting at Bright and Dark and we talked about manifestation, I started hysterically crying because I felt like someone just gave me the keys to the universe, like unlocked this key, because I was like, fuck, I'm like, you read about manifestation and I'm like, but like I didn't believe, like I wasn't like believing it. The way that I was like doing things was very much focused on like money, like making more money. And now that I kind of shifted my thinking toward more like, what does abundance mean to me? Is it just about money? Like, no, perhaps not. Like, what does abundance mean to me? And for like the universe to like meet me, it's like I one have to kind of do a bit of shadow work on it, but a bit of like claiming what it is that I want, and like kind of proclaiming it and believing that I deserve it. And there's like more to manifestation, but that's just where I'm at. I'm going to stop talking now. Thank you for listening. And Kat is next.
Hey, I have so much to say on everything. Yay! Let's start with fear of failure, because we just talked on that one. And manifestation. At some point in my life, I realized I was manifesting failure because I was so prepared to fail. And a funny thing happened to me the other day at work. We were all talking about our anxiety and our fear of failure. During one of those times, we actually spent time talking to each other. And I told them that I had that letter that I had received a couple months ago. I said it was very positive. It said, "You're just this close." And everybody was like, "You thought you were going to get fired." I'm like, "I totally thought I was going to get fired." They all understood this idea of just that little tiny bit of information that says you're not quite doing what we want. And everyone around me understood that meant that I thought I was going to get fired. And I'm like, well, at least you all get it. That's the mindset that we're in. I'm working to try to free myself of that mindset. And I'm doing a pretty good job. I still have my thing in front of me saying that I deserve ease. I'm still working on that, taking a breath and relaxing. I need to start to work on feeling the energy around me and receiving that energy as my way of uplifting myself and giving myself the energy that I need to properly get through my day. Um, I've been reading about Van Gogh, so that's another thing that we're going to talk about. Van Gogh is an artist, as everybody knows. And I was just reading his biography about all the times that he was starving and times that he chose to continue with his art rather than eat because he was driven to have models, to have them pose for him. And he would literally choose paying models so that he can continue his artwork rather than feeding himself. And he would get to the point where he was dizzy and he was aware that he was doing this to himself, but he was so driven by his artwork that that was his choice um, to go on doing that. And then he was having some mental issues as well, but it was just a sad story to listen to him about all the melancholy that he felt and all of that. And it made me think about the way we look at life too. Like, are you that driven to do something, or are you letting things get in your way where you're not allowing yourself to pursue those things because of money, which is basically what he chose to do. And it's not practical in this world, but it's still something that we should push toward, is pursuing our dreams and making them viable as far as an income can be. Whether you have to supplement that with other incomes or if it's just a hobby on top of your present job, but always pursuing that dream for yourself. Um, I think as a society, we are sincerely taught that we're to work and slave all our years away for that light at the end of the tunnel, which is retirement. All of our goals and stuff are meant to be for when we can no longer have to do all the things that we have to do. And having two parents and that both passed away early, I can tell you that that is not something that needs to be strived for. My dad set up money for my mother because he was going to die before her. He was sure of this. He was going to not live any longer than 61 years of age. So he put tons and tons and tons of money into his retirement and everything so that she would live longer. And no, she died at 55 of cancer. So my dad lived longer and he started to enjoy some of that money, but he didn't last very long either. And all of that hard work that he put into that is now with my stepmother. She's the one that's enjoying all of that. Um, so you just never know. You can't really count on anything, and you need to make each day count because you never know what's coming around the corner. And if we wait, we could wait too long, and then it's just for nothing. But that's what I have. And then Jen's next.
I get a little soapboxy with this conversation too, because I like literally uh, started a nonprofit that was all about creating a different, an alternative system that back then we called ourselves creatives because being a witch and saying witch wasn't a safe thing to do, but this nonprofit had multiple community houses and had a very complex system of support and of mutual aid. And that is really, really important. What it was missing was what we are doing with Bright and Dark, this shadow work, the deconstruction work, so that we can actually sincerely work together and we can sincerely collaborate on things. And so one thing as you guys were talking that kind of came up for me was we underestimate the power of the work that we are doing right now, right? Even coming to a place like this and having these conversations and doing that internal work so that we can have these conversations uh, again, sincerely and authentically. This is setting us up for whatever the future holds for us. Cultivating and building relationships with other humans is setting us up for our future. Um, as someone who spent a lot of my life being houseless uh, and living with, 20 bucks in my pocket and needing to figure out, how to make that stretch, a week. Um, the threat of living in poverty or living without a home or all of those threats that are held over us to keep us in the system become completely powerless when you have community. When you have community, you will never go hungry. You will never be houseless if you don't want to be, right? Um, the only time that that is a reality is when we continue to navigate in that capitalistic society, that like patriarchal, that like we are separate. We can't share a vehicle, we can't share a lawnmower, we can't share, you know, food. Um, that that is only a threat when you believe that that is the only option, right? That if I can't pay my um I don't know. I have a very um I don't know, unique perspective on financial stuff in general. I mean, I went over a decade without even having a personal bank account and navigated life in an underground community. So nobody dealt with money. Nobody dealt with um, a lot of the things that are kind of held over most people's heads as far as like, oh, you have to put away money for retirement. When the truth is, you don't know what's going to happen next week. Like if you have, $500,000 in a retirement account, look at the state of our economy right now. Like, what is it? Do you really think that's going to be there in 10 years? Like this, like everything's going to be fine once I retire thing. I joke about my retirement being in a nunnery, but the truth is that if you live in a perpetual state of, I am waiting until I have this, or until I'm 60, or until I retire, you will always be waiting. But when you start navigating life from a place of presence, of I'm going to live today the most I can, I'm going to do the most with today that I can do, it changes things. It brings you back, and it kind of reboots that manifestation um, motor that we have when you're present, right? Because you're not telling the universe that you want it. When I retire, I want to live the life of my dreams, or when my bank account hits a certain level, or when I have, when I buy a piece of property with a bunch of friends and move off and start a commune, that's when life's going to be great, right? Uh, Circling back around, the work that you're doing now, this internal work, this uh, learning how to be as present as possible is setting you up for your future. And that's the best possible thing you could do for your retirement. And I'm going to jump off that soapbox and pass it off to Petra.
Can you hear me? Okay. I was like, I'm on the computer. So I'm like, I don't know what's going on. And all these like random things, I'll like hover over something, then it's like window pop up, and I'm like, I have no idea what's going on. Also, I don't know if you can see them. I have 2 puppies and then a third. I have all the dogs in here. because Bradley has COVID. So he's sleeping in their room because I don't have COVID. Yay! So he's grounded. Like he's all like sealed off at nighttime, and then he's wearing an N99 for the rest of the time he's in the house and whatever. So that's been kind of intense. So the dogs are in here with me, and they've been pretty good. They're like, I like witchy chats. This is cool. I wanted to say, like, I love this conversation so much. I feel like I could talk like literally all day about all of this stuff. I'm just like, yes. And I put some stuff in the chat just about resources in terms of like money and finance, like her first 100K on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. I don't remember her name, but she's like someone who worked in finance and then specifically was like, I want a feminist approach to finance because all the finance bros are really like make it super inaccessible for anyone who's not a cishet white older dude. So if anyone like, there's tons of testimonials in her comments. It's very US based. So like I'm in Canada, so it doesn't super help me because how our taxation systems and say all the things are structured very differently. But that's a really great resource. The other one, just when we were talking about kind of like liberatory praxis, which praxis is a fancy word for practice. It's like about the way that you think about how you practice your beliefs in the world, essentially. And Tika is the drama right now. Hey, you're okay. She's just like, I have a piece of rice on my face. I have to flail. Sorry. But it's Matu Gwendolyn has some great resources. And one of the things that I think we haven't really talked about here that I think that is important is, and it relates to the community, the idea of community is like mutual aid. Which is essentially that piece of like, if you have community, if you have people that are willing to help you, then you will never, go without. I've never really been super trustworthy, like had really trusting of the government. I don't know where that comes from. I don't think my dad is particularly. I think that that's probably part of it. And it also is probably a bit of pattern recognition. Like you see enough things and you're like, y'all don't really know what you're doing, do you? Well, we're just all making it up as we go along. But I wanted to just, say that. One second. Rin, stop. He has like a little water bottle. It's like a hamster bottle, but the sound, I'm like, I can't think and talk at this time. He's doing that. What I wanted to say is that I think it's also really important to listen to people who have had to live this stuff out and have been marginalized from systems in perpetuity, basically, which is like Black and brown and other people of color, specifically women. I've learned so much, especially on TikTok. And if anybody wants like resources, you can look up like abolition on TikTok or on Instagram. Those hashtags would find you a lot of people. Anyone, there's lots of people. The idea, if you search the hashtag decolonize, especially on Instagram, like accounts that have decolonize in the name, there's like a decolonize therapy, there's a decolonize love, there's a whole bunch of different things. These are kind of ideas and things that I've been looking at for a long time. And I think that it's important. There's a lot of, especially in the United States, you guys are going to go through another election cycle relatively soon. And it's important to look to people who have been in this work, learning about like who have experience. And most of those people don't look like me. Like most of those people don't have skin like I have. Like they have, as white people, I like as a white person, I've been insulated from those systems. Sorry, my computer's doing flashy announcement things. Anyway, have been insulated from those systems, and so I acknowledge, I don't know if you just heard Rin yawn, but he was very loud. For me, it's important for me as a white woman to say, hey, like, I'm not the expert in this, and I really need to go to people who are the expert and to learn from these people, from their books, by buying them or taking them up from the library if I don't have the financial means to do so, supporting their content on various platforms. Like, I know that we don't all have like extra money to throw around because, well, capitalism has gone kind of batshit crazy the past couple of years, especially, and the greed inflation is real and we're all feeling it. But I think that there are many ways, like Ezra was saying, about like supporting people's content and watching stuff and making sure that we're doing those things that can be really helpful. And I'm someone who thinks that like the delineation between like this is mundane and this is magical is like really arbitrary. And I think that living out kind of a decolonial, like liberatory like politic is really important to make what I believe, like to me, being in alignment with like what we think about and what we're learning in terms of our beliefs and the conversations that we're having is really important in a compassionate way. I think that this gets like, I hang out in leftist spaces sometimes. Christians and Spice is also awesome. Imani is great. But in lots of like leftist spaces and places, people can get really like, this is why I think abolition is so important. People can get really carceral, which basically means people are like punishment based. Like if you're, this is the cancel culture vibes, right? It's like, if you're not in alignment with this, then you're canceled and you suck. And it's like, that is a remnant of white supremacist society. You know, it's shame based. It's like, let's make people conform, and then we can have this illusion of safety. And the truth of the matter is the world is not fucking safe. It never has been. Like from like Pangea to now, like there's always been like predators, threats, things like that. Our threats now are less overt sometimes, and I think that they also get internalized, and that's where a lot of the trauma stuff comes from. And I think, you know, we're like, we were talking about that earlier, right? Like being different and being like not belonging and being neurodivergent and the trauma of those things. So I just wanted to bring those pieces into this because this is all shit that I'm like, I think about this stuff almost all the time. Like it's always kind of running in the back of my brain. And funnily enough, like 10 years ago, I remember like being like, I think it was like right in the you know, I picked medicine not just because I was like, oh, like I picked it because it was like combined all of my special interests, but also I remember being like, well, if there's an apocalypse, at least I have like useful skills. Like, and I'm just like, I don't know if that was like spirit guide humor or if it was like, you know what I mean? Like, what is that? Because the way that the world is going is like, we are kind of careening not so slowly towards like imminent societal collapse. And I don't say that to like scare the fuck out of people. I think that if you watch the news, you're probably already scared. But what I want to say with that is that like we have this group where, you know, I think a lot of us, I can generalize in this, myself included, have sustained like relational trauma where we feel like we don't belong. And so connecting with other humans can be scary. And this is a really beautiful place to practice being vulnerable and realizing that like, oh my goodness, I was vulnerable and I didn't die. Like teaching our nervous systems to disconfirm that traumatic experience. And pardon me, I just have to cough. And I think that that's important because the next step of that is then taking those, oh, hey, I was vulnerable in this space and I actually was met with connection and care, to realizing that like that actually can also happen in real life. And building those relationships at whatever pace our nervous systems can tolerate it, with whatever capacity we have in our local communities as well. Because I think that this is part of kind of white supremacy and capitalism, is this idea that like no one really understands us. Like, I don't know, I'm terminally unique, which is kind of the psychological term for it. And so like no one's like me and nobody understands me and I just don't belong. One, which is like very much in line with CPTSD, like that's what happens when you have complex trauma, is that you have a social a wounding in terms of like your social connection to other people. And so unlearning that means you need social connection. But then also, I think TikTok has done a really good job of this for a lot of people being like, wait, I'm not alone at all. Like there's no novel experience of mine. There's somebody making a video somewhere with like 9,000 comments being like, oh my God, me too. And so I just want to say that, like, even though this is an online space, I've been really grateful for like how I've learned here to like take those lessons and connect more with people in my everyday life and that live closer to me geographically. And I think that that's an important part of moving against capitalism, is finding like local groups and places to also do those things. I hope that makes sense. But I'm like aware of the time, so I'm gonna just hand the mic over to whoever is next. Maria.
Yep. Thanks. I just have a really quick thing to say. You know, and what Petra just said really kind of summed it up. That last part about what you said, and you know, like when we talk about like community and wanting to form community, I just felt like it was important to know, you know, using that discernment as well of like what community that you're in. So like one of my barometers is when I'm entering in a community is how will they react when our perspectives don't align, you know? And so like it's just like important, like as we talk about, you know, being a part of community and maybe entering into different communities as we all travel along on this earthly plane, you know, is just kind of putting that in your ear about like discernment and, you know, potentially like teaching others like youngins, like how to, you know, use that discernment as well. And so, because there's been a lot of communities that have caused harm, um, you know, as well. But Petra, I just love what you said there, like at the end. So that's all discernment. And Ezra, I know you had your hand up. We have like 3 minutes left if you wanted to close us out for today. And if not, that's okay too.
I don't really remember what I was going to say. I think I was just basically agreement with Petra about about the like definitely like getting local in your communities. And I think there was an earlier part that was just pretty much in agreement, and I probably had some ideas, but I'll just communicate them in other ways later. But I think this is a really good talk, though. I always loved SASS Mass because we just get to kind of ride the flow of what is happening. And I've been having really vivid dreams lately, and it makes sense that it's the dreaming moon. I had a dream just last night, like I literally woke up from it and then like was like, oh God, it's SASS Mass. I gotta go log on. And it was basically, you know, me using nonviolent communication to change I was at a long table with all of the pro-Israel Jews that I know, and I was using nonviolent communication to change their mind, essentially. And basically right before I woke up, it was like, okay, what next? They were like, okay, our minds are changed. What next? Basically, and I woke up with like the question that was like lingering in my head. So. It feels like this conversation almost like kind of led straight, like everyone was kind of like, okay, so what next? That kind of thing.
Thank you everyone for coming to SASS today. Where we usually pick up in numbers during the dark times. So during the winter time, it's almost like we all cling to each other to get through like the holidays, which is awesome. Cling away, like here we go. I just gentle reminder to give yourself a little extra space because we are doing an inward turn, and we are turning inward because that's the way that our physical bodies respond when there is less light. It's a very science thing. So when you catch yourself going, I'm depressed, what's going on? There's something wrong with me. you can give yourself that gentle reminder of like, oh, I'm a witch and I'm super sensitive to, I'm actually connected and it makes sense why I'm doing this. So give yourself a little extra space, a little extra love. For those of you that are coming to the workshop on the 16th, showing up is 100% spirit-led, intuition-led, and it is completely dependent on who shows up. It's a really fun workshop if you've never gone. Uh, we've gone into some really intense channeling sessions and have done just like full spectrum. Again, it depends on who shows up and what everyone's team is wanting to bring forward. So I'll see you guys then. Those of you that are in the Spellcrafters Guild, I will see you tonight at the studio. And have a great week. May your practice be expansive and filled with many blessings, bright and dark. Bye, guys.